Hello and welcome today in Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone. We have a lot going on in the city. And one of the things that we have going on, of course, is that we've gotten very busy at the Community Resource Center, which is wonderful. It's the dream that we had. It's what we hoped would happen. People are stopping by, people are making appointments, events are happening. One of the things that Mayor Concannon had mentioned to us when we had the open house was that he envisioned that there may be some things we never even anticipated or imagined when we first set out to do this. And one of those things is happening right now here in March. We're running a pilot program with housing families to provide free legal advice to low-income families here in Woburn. So very excited to bring that. And Mike, already your prediction is coming true.
Yeah, I knew it would. We try to think of a lot of things. We try to anticipate needs and try to create ways to respond to those needs. But we also know that every day a new issue comes up. Someone new comes through the door with a new idea, and we got to be flexible. So I'm glad to see we're starting off flexible, and I think this is the beginning of all sorts of great ideas and great opportunities over there at the center.
Yeah, me too. Very, very excited to see it all coming together. Another thing that's coming together is last year we had this idea that we would throw a citywide kindness day. We kind of used it to jumpstart the community outreach function here in the mayor's office. And, I went into it not really sure what to expect, thinking we would do a couple of things and that it might be a one-time, interesting, fun event. And it turns out we got a lot of participation and a lot of interest in doing it again. So this March 20th, we'll have our second now annual Citywide Kindness Day. Lots of things happening. We'll go over the schedule as we get closer to the 20th, but I thought it might be a good moment to pause and give you an opportunity, Mike, to talk a little bit about what you hope people take away from that day.
Yeah, as you said, this is the second time doing it, and the first time through, I think we had a few basic ideas, and then we opened it up, and other people came with their ideas, and we saw a lot of cool things happening throughout the city, and I'm looking forward to another year of that. I would say that really what I'm looking for out of it is just a little bit of a pause, take a breath, and maybe try to find a way on that particular day to do something nice for somebody else or to appreciate somebody's kindness to you, and then maybe build a little momentum from there, and maybe it can last another day or two or more. So really, that to me is the goal, and if we can get that out of it, I'll be happy.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's a great opportunity to meet some people maybe you hadn't met before, to attend an event in a location that is familiar to you or unfamiliar to you, and gives you a chance to interact with some Woburn neighbors and friends that you might not see very often.
Yep. Yeah. And I hit a few of the events last year and hope to do the same again this year. I know we had one of the highlights was the sing along at the senior center, which I was happy to observe, not so happy to participate in. Um, and I don't think those listening were happy that I participated either.
You are a wonderful sport about it.
Good sport, not a great singer. But I look forward to all those different interactions. We were in the morning, we were with some of the seniors, and in the afternoon, we were with little brownies and Girl Scouts. And it's just great to see everybody in the city step up and do their little thing to contribute to a pretty cool day.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun day. A not as fun thing is spending money or thinking about how we have to do budgeting. And we know that we're very early in the budgeting process for the year. There's a lot of work still to happen, but we have started that. And some of what has been talked about at school committee meetings and at city council meetings and in the paper, people have started to talk about what things the school might need. And there are some numbers, very preliminary, that talk about if we did nothing but honor the employee contracts that we have, we would still see, growth in budget year over year and operating costs. We know there's some desire to have an early childhood center, and one of the ways to do that is to bring in modulars. And so there's pretty big ask potentially around that. And then very long term, hopefully there might be some new schools that need to be built. We've talked a lot about, a North Woburn Elementary School and some middle schools and what we need to address some aging infrastructure here. That adds up to a whole bunch of scary for people, right?
Yeah.
And so we know we don't have the answers of what the numbers are going to be yet. We're nowhere near knowing that. But I thought it'd be helpful to just take a moment, acknowledge what we know is, sort of swimming out there, particularly around schools, because it is our largest budget item. And just talk a little bit about the approach you're taking to working through this and leading us towards a number at some point as the coming weeks happen.
Yeah, so you identified the three lanes really that we look at. One is the operating lane, FY26 operating budget, the day-to-day expenses, the salaries, the cost of doing business in a given year here in the city. So the operating budget process is almost a year-round process, really. But it heats up right around now. We're already in the process of seeking input from each of the departments in the city, including the schools, the biggest cost center in the city. So we'll get their numbers in terms of what it takes to keep the departments operating at the current level, what built-in expenses and increases are there in terms of contractual increases and steps and just things that are built in. So we'll get those numbers in the next couple of weeks, and we'll start the discussions with each of those departments. The goal is to try to provide what's needed, but save as much money as we possibly can. People ask me, do you think taxes are going to go up again? And I have to ask them, do you mean the tax rate or do you mean the amount of money you're likely to pay next year? Because the tax rate, I'm not sure yet. But I can tell you that if we fund what we currently are doing here in the city again next year, then the taxes will go up to be able to pay for that. Because there are some basics like contracts that call for cost of living adjustments, and those lead to increases. And there are, as I mentioned, there are some step increases, there are longevity costs, there's things that are just built into the way we operate the city. So barring any cuts on the other side, there will be increases. What we're working on now is trying to understand what those look like and how to mitigate them as best we can. So that's the operating lane. That's the first one. The second one is I guess you'd call it the pay-as-you-go capital expenses, the big things that we need to buy or repair in the next year, like buying a fire truck or buying a police car or putting a roof on a building or, those type of capital expenses that you deal with in your own home. And we're looking at those now. We're seeking the input of the various departments and what their capital needs are. And we'll try our best to accommodate as many of those as we can, again, with our eye on the bottom line. And then the third lane is the longer term capital, big projects type of bucket, where we talk about building a new school or building a water treatment plant or constructing a park somewhere. And those are ongoing. We're always looking at those. And we are anticipating in the next year advancing the discussion about what we need to do, particularly with the schools, with the North Woburn schools and the middle schools. So for right now, that's a longer term discussion, and the immediate focus, I would say, is the operating budget. The other piece that you mentioned, again, pertaining to the schools, is the process they're going through right now to try to deal with capacity issues in the school system. As people have heard, the school committee is looking at redistricting students to better use the space we have in the city. And they're also looking at an option to purchase modular portable classrooms to help with some of our space needs. That process, particularly regarding the portables, I'd say it's still in process. There's still more questions that need to be answered. I expect a dialogue between the school committee and the city council very soon to get some of those questions answered. All the while, the school committee continues to work on its redistricting plans because either way, there needs to be some movement to better balance and to better utilize the space we have. So all of that is really happening at the same time, and it's intertwined. So I expect to see some clarity shortly on the issue of redistricting with or without modular classrooms. So I'm hoping that we get those answers fairly soon. We can get our arms around that issue and make some decisions as we go forward. So all of that is happening really at the same time. I will tell those listening that we are very mindful that we had a significant increase in taxes this current year. Uh, think about it every day, all day. Try to figure out ways to reduce that type of burden on our taxpayers. But I do want to be honest and transparent with everybody watching and listening. You know, to continue to do what we do with the built-in obligations we have means taxes will go up. And as we get more information and that becomes clearer and what those numbers look like, we'll share them as soon as we have them.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit about schools from another perspective. For those folks, I know, Mike, you watched it and I've watched it, and so have others around the last school committee meeting. There was a student who talked about some safety concerns. I think it was the prior school committee meeting. There was some concerns raised by some staff in the Woburn Teachers Association. And we've had a number of people acknowledging that this is the domain of the school committee and the schools, but wanting to know if we know what's happening more
Yeah.
broadly in the city. And so I thought it was an opportunity to just sort of acknowledge, we've heard and seen those concerns and what your hope is for this, or expectation is around what happens next from a school committee standpoint.
Yeah, I will tell you I am aware and I've been talking to people about it. I did watch the school committee meeting. Um, I'm as concerned as the student who presented and the parents of students in the system and the school committee. What has been described is unacceptable. We want all of our students to be able to focus on learning when they're in our schools. We don't want them to be thinking about safety concerns or bullying or a negative environment. We want them to be able to focus on the basics. And when I hear a student express her concern that that environment is not conducive to learning and much of their time is occupied thinking about other things, that greatly concerns me. I've talked to the superintendent about this. He and I we probably talk 3 or 4 times a week, but we talk in person and tour a different school every Friday where we get to see the culture and the climate and the working environment of the schools in person with our own eyes. And we often follow up with discussion on what we've seen, what we've heard, and what we think about it. So this is a topic that is on my mind. To your point about the roles and responsibilities, I have to be careful not to usurp the authority of the elected school committee. They are the body entrusted with running our schools. I like to think we have a strong partnership, that I can weigh in and that my thoughts are heard and my opinions are respected. And at the end of the day, I am the mayor of the city, and people look to me to make sure that I am setting the right tone throughout all the various departments in the city, and I take that responsibility seriously. So when I speak with school committee members and I speak with the superintendent and his team, I make sure to convey how I feel about these circumstances. So my hope and my expectation, and I think it's accurate, is that the school committee and the superintendent and team listened carefully to those concerns, and they've listened to the concerns of others, and they're taking the steps to improve the culture and the environment in all our schools, not just Woburn High School, to make sure that the kids and the teachers and the staff and all involved can focus on the learning. I'll continue to reiterate those concerns with all of the team, and I'll be watching closely to make sure that improvement is happening.
Great, thank you. We won't spend too much time on this. I know we have a town hall coming up on Thursday. We'll be excited to answer questions from people there. But I do think it's helpful for people to know that we have a bunch of special permits of things that are progressing projects that we're working on. I think we have the annex, which is the building next to City Hall. It's progressing. We have Fire Station 4, which is moving comfortably along to the old building coming down. We have talked about yard waste potentially being a place for that. I may be missing others.
Yeah, we have the Green Street splash pad bathroom building. Yep. So these are all special permits that the city is required to obtain essentially from the city in order for us to use land and buildings for municipal uses. So we have packages prepared to go to the city council to explain to the council exactly what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it. For the most part, they already understand. They know about these projects. They funded them. They know what's going there. But this is part of the process. So, there'll be a few of those special permit requests in front of the city council in the next few weeks. We look forward to an open dialogue with them. It gives the public an opportunity to come in and weigh in on some of these issues. At the end of the day, we want to build things that the people asked us to build in a way they want them built, so that they see the value and they get the positive use from these buildings and these lands. So it's just a part of the process. I think if people have interest or concerns or questions about any of these projects, by all means, they can come to these public hearings on the special permits. Some of these, like the fire stations in particular, have building committee meetings that are regularly held open to the public. They can come and talk to us there. And they can certainly send an email. They can come to a town hall. They can come by the office and ask questions. Everything we're trying to do is for the benefit of the city. And we want to be transparent and collaborative as we do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I know we're looking forward to people's comments and questions on Thursday. And just to reiterate, that's at 6 o'clock in City Council chambers. And as we've done before, we'll answer all the questions of the folks that are there and look forward to it.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. I think it's a good way for people to just talk face to face with their city government, ask any questions they might have. And again, if they can't be there and they want to submit a question in advance, that's fine too. And if they'd just rather not do that in public, they'd rather call me on the phone or email me or come in the office, that's always fine too. We want people to know what we're doing, and we want them to be happy that we're doing it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Samantha.
Next up, Jacoby, welcome.
Nice to
Glad
see
to
you.
have I'm glad to have you here, Jacoby. Jacoby's smiling because he's being so nice to me. Like I had two false starts with you watching the show. We'll never know, but I was a little last minute harried coming into today's taping, and he was a true gentleman and didn't say anything as I had to start twice. But thank you for being with us. I'm glad to be here today to talk to you about Voices of Tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about what the inspiration for that event was.
So the inspiration of that event is that as a community and throughout community events, we feel that communities tend to overlook the youth and more specifically their voices. So we feel this is an opportunity to bridge that gap and form connections between the youth and the community through our stories with the speakers.
I love it. As a parent of adult children, there's no shortage of ideas, opinions, vision that comes from folks who are younger. And so I'm really appreciative that all of you are joining us to organize this event. For those folks who are coming to the event, what kind of storytelling and things should they expect?
Well, in all seriousness, these are serious personal stories of growth, personal inspiration, and moments that have affected us greatly. And we hope that after these stories that we can continue after the event to create conversations that are meaningful. And we hope that these stories kind of encourage those conversations to happen.
Great. And is my understanding, but I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is this is really an event for people of all ages. The goal is to sort of create some dialogue and things, but who are you hoping will join us on that day?
Well, honestly, I feel like there's no complex answer to that. We hope everybody comes and joins, and we think that these stories can relate to everybody, all generations, all groups of people, and that brings up another common theme of the event, which is bridging connections, and bridging the gap between communities. So it's really for everybody.
I love that. Now, it is one of our favorite cozy places, Studio Cafe. Remind our
Yes.
audience the time and date of this event.
Okay, so it's on Wednesday, March 12th from 6 to 7:30, like you said, at the Studio Cafe. And the Studio Cafe is on 327 Main Street in Woburn Center. And it's free for everybody. Everybody is welcome. And there's also coffee, tea, and beverages for purchase too, if anybody would like that as well.
Excellent. Well, Jacoby, thank you for joining us today and representing what is a really impressive panel of young people who are there to share their stories. I expect it's going to be a wonderful time together and really appreciate all of you who have helped organize this.
Of course, it was a pleasure being here as well too.
Thank you, Jacoby.
No problem.
Next up, I'll be chatting with Mark Salvati, our city solicitor. We're going to talk about ADUs. We've been getting a lot of phone calls about it, so I know you're going to be interested in this segment. Joining me, I want to talk about ADUs or accessory dwelling units. Before we talk a little bit about how we're going to be implementing it, I want to kind of get on the same page with everybody. What is an ADU?
Well, it's an accessory dwelling unit. It's something the state has mandated because of the housing crisis mainly. It's going to allow anyone who can do it to put an attached or a detached unit to add housing to the market here. There are some regulations on it, which we will discuss, but it's basically a glorified or another name for an in-law apartment, really.
Excellent. We've actually gotten a few calls. Just I had two this morning and one well, not yesterday because of the weekend, but the end of last week. We definitely have people who are interested in learning more about it. Now, the state law, which we are required to follow, does allow local municipalities to put some regulation around how to implement the law locally. What are we as a community allowed to address as part of that state mandate?
Sure. So first off, the one big misconception that everyone has is that it's only going to be allowed in the R1 district. That is not true. It's the state has mandated that wherever single family homes are allowed, then ADUs are allowed. Currently, under our zoning, R1, 2, 3, 4, and S1 allow residential homes by right, single family homes by right. Therefore, the ADU would be allowed by right. In other zones where you have a single family that's pre-existing and legal, you will also be allowed to add an ADU, whether it's attached or detached, based on some of our restrictions. So if you want me to, I can go into those a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for people to get an idea and understand it.
Sure. The guidance from the state has been that really that restrictions just have to be reasonable, which means, you can't say some bizarre things that people can and can't do to prevent this. So basically, the way we're going to approach it is that if you meet the current setbacks for a single family structure with your primary residence, you'll be allowed to add an ADU. So let's take a typical 12,000 square foot lot, which complies with zoning, and you meet all the setbacks, and you have an interior space where you can add a unit, whether it's the basement or a split in the lower level or an upstairs. That's going to be allowed by right. That means without a special permit. If you are currently encroaching on any setbacks, say you're 20 feet off the front lot line, but it's a legal encroachment, meaning it predates zoning, then you will be allowed also to put an ADU in that primary residence, as long as you don't encroach any further. So what I'm talking about not only applies to attached, but detached as well. And then the only other provision that we have made that's somewhat more lenient than a typical residential is that the rear setback could go as close as 15 feet rather than the 30. So if you stayed at 30 on a small lot, there wouldn't be a lot that could do it. So we're saying we're going to treat the rear almost like a side, which is 12. So that people will have more flexibility in being able to do that. The other restrictions that will apply is that there's currently a lot coverage requirement, a percentage of the lot. That's going to remain in place, so you can't go over that coverage. Again, if you're currently encroaching legally, you can't go any further than that. And the height of the building it is restricted as well to the same as a single family. On the detached dwelling, we are saying that the maximum height is 20 feet to the peak. And we are also, I just want to remind everybody that an ADU, whether it's attached or detached, can only be 900 square feet in total.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Like I'm not looking to have anybody else on our property to live. So sorry for all of you friends who thought you were going to transfer my sort of old carriage house into living quarters. Maybe one day a kiddo of mine will get me upset enough that that will be the good living situation. But for right now, but I bring that example up because we do have like an old carriage house that could potentially be converted if somebody wanted to make a pretty significant investment it would take. But our lot coverage is, at capacity or very close to capacity with an addition that we put on previously. So you read my mind with mentioning that. Thanks for bringing that up. I do also think it's helpful to remind people that you're able to do it by right, but that doesn't mean you don't need permits. It means you don't need a special
Correct.
permit. Is that correct?
Well, you don't need a special permit, correct? You need a building permit, for sure. And it'll be the building commissioner who makes the decision as to whether you comply with the ADU requirements. And just a reminder that these are in flux, so to speak. It's just been filed. It's going to have its first read on the 18th. It'll go to committee. It'll go to the planning board for review and recommendation. So there's still a pretty good process, and the people can come down and voice their opinion and ask questions at all those meetings as well.
And between now and when that process is completed, if somebody is looking to do a project, what does that in sort of practical terms mean? Do they just have to?
They basically have to wait. I mean,
Okay.
it's gonna, technically, they could try to they could file it, but it's gonna take some time to process it. And by that time, the zoning change will be adopted. That's what we want. We want it to comply with what the council and the planning board decide. So what we filed is a recommendation based on the CMR or the state statute, and we're hoping that the planning board and the city council will shepherd that through and come to a great conclusion. And hopefully it helps people. The other provision I wanted to add is if you are detached, I think there's a fire requirement that the two structures remain at least 10 feet apart.
Okay. That's important. And you may not know the answer to this, but you may, in terms of sort of taxation and things, is it considered like what might be a two-family thing, like where I'm now taxed for an additional unit, or is it considered part of my individual property, or does that vary based on what's built?
It's going to vary. I feel bad for the assessor's office because they're going to be saddled with this problem really, because what is it? It's not a two. Can you appraise it as a two? I don't think so. I think they're going to be called like a 1+, and your value is going to go up, but probably not as much as if you had a duplex or a full-blown 1,500 square foot units. So it's going to be a lot of work for the assessors. I don't think the state has really come down with anything, and I don't know how even realtors are going to put a price on these things. It's going to be interesting to see, but it'll play out eventually, but it's going to be a long process, I think.
Right. Well, thanks for joining us and
Sure.
for stepping us through where we are in this process, kind of the baseline of where it is. There are a number of things happening, planning board and city council meetings where people will be able to come and hear more information. But I think it was useful to just kind of catch up on the basics of where we are and what happens next.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent.
Right.
Woburn, as always, please continue to take good care of each other.